copy of a copy of a copy of a copy copy. Deja vu.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Deja Reviewed podcast, where we talk about the original versions of TV shows and movies that were later rebooted. For season 1, Mark, we're reaching the end of season 1 here. We're discussing the Twilight Zone. I'm Michael.
And I'm Mark.
And today we're talking about the last episode of season 1, episode 36, titled A World of His Own. And A World of His Own, originally released on July 1st, 1960. We almost caught up in time, 60 years ago to when we actually were recording.
Other than we're 60 years behind.
We almost got him in time. Episode aired July 1st, 1960. It was directed by Ralph Nelson. It was written by a very prolific Twilight Zone writer, Richard Matheson. We'll talk about that later. And it starred Keenan Wynn, Phyllis Kirk, and Mary LaRoche.
There is a fifth dimension.
Both shadow and substance of things and
Suddenly up ahead.
Just cross over. You're moving into another dimension.
Next stop, the Twilight Zone.
All right, so I'm going to do the opening voiceover here, and thankfully it is not me who has to do the ending voiceover, which is going to be very confusing to explain. But here's the opening voiceover from A World of His Own. The home of Mr. Gregory West, one of America's most noted playwrights. The office of Mr. Gregory West. Mr. Gregory West, shy, quiet, and at the moment very happy. Mary, warm, affectionate. And then a little bit of dialogue between Gregory and Mary, and then it looks out the window. And the final ingredient, Mrs. Gregory West.
Did this remind you a lot of the opening narration of Mr. Denton on Doomsday? Where he's like the third player, a gun, and then they point to or maybe they don't even say the gun, but he's describes Mr. Denton, and then he describes fate, and he describes the gun.
It didn't till you just said it, but yes, it did now. I really like the sort of rhythm of this,
yeah.
and you don't get it without the visuals, but it starts with the exterior of the house, and like the home of Mr. Gregory West, cuts to the inside, shows his office, the office of Mr. Gregory West, pulls back, shows him, Mr. Gregory West. I thought that was cute.
Yeah, it was really good. And then the description from IMDb, a writer demonstrates he can control reality simply by dictating changes. That's arguably the best IMDb description I think we've had of an episode, maybe this entire season, but for sure in the last several. I feel like they've missed quite a bit.
Well, we had a few that were just like downright inaccurate, like not even describing the same episode, but that's pretty good. And I mean, I think, if we wanted to quibble with it, like it's less about controlling reality than that he can like create things just by sort of speaking them into existence, which I think is very interesting. And this was not a religious themed episode, but you can't help but think of like that's sort of in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the sort of power of God is being able to speak things into existence. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. And then he says, and let there be light. And whatever he says is what happens. So it was definitely that religious element to it, although they didn't really play with that.
And before we get away from Richard Matheson, he, I think, was the most, other than Serling, the most prolific Twilight Zone writer. He wrote 16 total episodes, 2 that were based on short stories. The ones that we've seen already, And When the Sky Was Opened, we loved. Third from the Sun, we pretty much loved. The Last Flight, we pretty much loved. A World of Difference, which was very similar, I feel like, in tone and theme to this one, which I think...
Which one was A World of Difference?
That was the one... this is the one you always forget. This is the one... that was the one where he was having a nervous breakdown. He was living his TV life, and he ran away with the woman.
Oh, right.
And they abandoned their child.
So that is interesting that those 2 episodes, not both have a world in the title, but also him playing with this idea of the blurring between the sort of fictional world and real world.
Exactly. Yeah, that was sort of the connection that I felt like these two had.
Yeah. Can I also say, when you said he's very prolific and did 16 episodes, which it is, that's a lot of episodes of anything for someone to write. But just to think about like that he's the next most prolific after Rod Serling, and this show ran for like 5 seasons in its original run. I mean, Serling probably wrote 130 episodes or something, like just an order of magnitude more than like the next most person. And as we've talked about, since all of big tech is listening in on our conversations and are tracking our stuff, you know, you and I both see Twilight Zone related stuff showing up in our Twitter feeds and Google searches,
Google News.
and, you know, one of these days I'm going to see just like on the sidebar, you know, an ad for like buy the Twilight Zone season 1 or something. I haven't seen that. I think because I was doing some home theater. I don't know what the right word is, renovations, switching some stuff out, getting some new gear. And so I was like doing some searches for stuff. So everything I see in my ads now is like ads for home theater gear.
Yeah, I've been looking for a point of sale system for the theater, and that's literally all I see now.
Yeah, you do like 2 searches for something, and then that's all you're going to see for the net. I'm going to have to like search for something else that I don't even want just to start changing out some of the ads because I'm getting bored of seeing the same ones.
Yeah, same here.
Anyhow, what I was going to say is, so I saw something show up on my feed the other day that I was looking at, and it was talking about, you know, some interview with Rod Serling where he had talked about like what his regrets were about the Twilight Zone, or the things that he, you know, thinks could have been done differently. And one thing he mentioned that I'm sure we'll talk about this in our wrap-up episode next week, wrap-up of season 1, was the sort of unevenness. But another thing that he talked about was just like basically he was exhausted because he was writing so many of the episodes and serving as the showrunner, which is really a job in and of itself. Like you're coordinating every episode getting, you know, getting written, whether you're writing it or not, you know, overseeing the production, dealing with the budgets, you know, working, you know, though he's also the liaison with the studio. So if there's notes from the studio execs that have to be addressed or whatever, going, like he just was taking on a lot. And the fact that he wrote so many episodes, I just thought it's interesting to hear Richard Matheson is the next most prolific with less than 20 episodes. And I don't know what Serling's total is, but it's got to be, you know, well over 100.
At least I think Matheson's the next most. Well, I have written.
He probably is. We've only really seen 3: Serling, Matheson, and who's the other guy who's written a couple episodes this season?
I can't remember offhand.
But there's only 3 who wrote more than one episode.
Yeah. I've written over 130 episodes of my 1-minute podcast, Improv Tips, and I find that exhausting. So.
Yeah, and I mean we're on episode 36 of this podcast, and gosh, that feels like a lot.
Yeah,
and we just have to coordinate the 2 of us, not an entire production of a TV show.
Very true.
And dealing with the studio and everything else.
Very true.
Although if any studio would like to pick up this podcast and make it into a TV show and pay us lots of money, we would be happy to take a meeting with you. So I just thought I'd mention that because it felt very appropriate as we were wrapping into the end of this season.
Very good. Of course. Okay, so let's talk about this episode. We've got another episode kind of exploring the issues of marriage and the happiness and the happiness
or lack thereof.
Right. So
can I jump in because it relates to the voiceover where they have Mr. Gregory West and then they introduce Mary, and I assumed, maybe I was dumb, but I thought this was a good bit of like misdirection. I assumed Mary was his wife and actually wrote like, oh, maybe for the first time we're going to see like a happy marriage in the Twilight Zone because they're all lovey-dovey. And it's like, nope, that's the mistress. Here's the wife looking in from outside at him with the mistress.
Oh, it was definitely intentional misdirection.
100.
Yeah, it was definitely intentional misdirection, and it was good. I agree with you. That opening narration with the visuals was really cool. I just wanted to point out that Kelsey and I have gone down a little bit of a rabbit hole watching the new trend, I think, of reality television is just devaluing marriage. And like, I have been divorced. I am engaged to be married again at the end of this year. God willing, the COVID goes away or is under control. But we watched 2 shows back to back. One was on Netflix, Love is Blind. I don't know if you watched any of that.
I have not.
It's literally these people basically speed date with each other behind these screens so they don't see each other. And then if they propose to each other, then they get to see each other and they decide if they want to get married. And it's super clear, like most of these people are very attractive, and it's super clear that of course love isn't blind because physical intimacy and like you are physically attracted to people is an important part of marriage. And it's okay that it's an important part of marriage. That is part of it. So we watched that. It was, frankly, it's a terrible, terrible show, and I do not recommend anyone watch it. But man, it was pretty addictive while we were watching it. So then of course, Netflix recommended that we watch Married at First Sight, which this is apparently in its 9th season. And I assume it's not a Netflix original because it had like the dramatic like commercial breaks where they're like, do you actually love her? And they'd like have the guy just sweating, and then they'd cut to, and then it would come back and he'd be like, yeah, of course I love her. And so the premise of this one is it's basically the modern version of arranged marriage. These experts, which by the way, one of the experts, I forget her last name, but her name is Dr. Pepper or something. And I'm like, why don't they call her Dr. Pepper? Because they always call her Dr. Walsh or whatever. I'm like, you can call her Dr. Pepper or not. They probably are like, well, we want ad money from Dr. Pepper before we're going to do that. But, or for Pepsi. So this one.
Was she drinking a Dr. Pepper?
No, at no point. I was very disappointed. So at this point, the point of this one is these experts interview all these people and give them these tests and all this stuff, like an eHarmony type thing. And then the experts pair up these 4 couples that they think will be good. So these people don't even see each other till the wedding day. They get married, they go on a honeymoon, and then they have like 8 weeks to live together and decide if they want to stay married or get divorced. And as a lawyer, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, because they keep saying that it's legally binding. So I don't know how many people are actually aware of this. I'm realizing less and less as we're planning our own wedding are actually aware of this. The ceremony that you have done is nothing. Like it's not legally binding. Like the courthouse ceremony is always more legally binding. Signing the marriage certificate with a witness and giving it and registering it with your county, though, that is the only thing that matters about marriage. That's the only legally binding thing. You can go this is how Mormons get away with, because we also watch one of those stupid shows about multiple, not the good one, Big Love apparently is the good one, but we watched a reality show about the polygamous lifestyles in Utah, I guess they were. And so those people, the way they get away with doing that, where it's illegal, is they marry the first wife, divorce her, marry the second wife, divorce her, marry the third wife, and then I keep them all as quote unquote wives. None of the ceremony stuff matters. So as the attorney, as I'm watching this, I'm like, I hope they didn't actually marry them, because if that guy's ready, I hope that guy's ready to give up like 65% of his shit when they get divorced, because that's the reality of divorce law in the United States. The guy is going to get screwed. And so
maybe they sign a prenup off screen.
You would assume that they would have to do that, or that this is just reality television and they are not actually legally married. But
right,
maybe I should go check the courthouse.
I have 3 comments on this. One is, just a few weeks ago, you were, I think, justifiably noting that I often talk about watching shows that I don't actually think are the best thing, but I'm just sort of committed to them and keep watching them. I feel like you have outdone me, because I feel like every show you recommend or you don't recommend, you're like, yeah, we were watching these 8 shows and they were all terrible.
Okay.
So we kept watching.
However, I think you're picking your shows. I am not choosing these shows. I am along with the ride. This is Kelsey choosing these shows, first of all.
So you're blaming your wife to be for all of your viewing habits.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm gonna speak her out of existence or throw her into the fire like they did in this episode.
So number 2, I think the first thing you said about kind of devaluing marriage, I think is exactly right. You know, we talked several episodes ago, I think it was during a stop at Willoughby, about, you know, looking back at the 60s, and we're like, well, why didn't they just get divorced? Well, maybe that looked different back then and you'd feel really bad about doing that. And I think that I think that stigma of being divorced is gone. And I think that's good, because sometimes people do need to get out of marriages. But the shows you're describing, a lot of that is like they're so just treating it as like, yeah, it's kind of like an extended date. Like, instead of like, hey, we're going to put you guys together for 8 weeks and then you decide if you want to stay together and we'll marry you if you do. It's like, well, let's just get married and, you try it for 8 weeks. And if that didn't work, then we'll just divorce. And that's not a thing. And that to me kind of seems like going too much to that extreme.
Agreed.
I'd agree with you on the devaluing. There's sort of no point to that institution, like, I guess, other than for tax purposes, if it's really that disposable that like it's essentially like, yeah, we tried a date, it was good, let's try a marriage and we'll see how that goes. And
the only other value is if you're a completely vapid idiot with no skills except for being pretty, and you marry a fat ogre a reality star that somehow ascends to the presidency of the United States, then wait till he's no longer president to divorce him and take all of his shit. I have no sympathy for Melania, by the way. Kelsey is always like trying to tell me, she's like, well, I'm like, she knew what this was. She knew what she was getting into. And she actually could, if she was a good person, could be doing something in the role of first lady, but she hasn't done a goddamn thing. So screw her. She's as bad as the rest of them.
I think you're forgetting about her anti-bullying campaign, which is like,
she should just be retweeting his tweets.
About
I know.
The Trump presidency.
I know. And it would have been a good thing. And especially coming from her, if she had actually done something with it, but she hasn't done shit with that. Oh, they're all deplorable. Anyhow, this is not a politics podcast.
I think at some point it just became one. Like not just now, but like weeks ago. So then my last thing, to your point about like what is legally binding or not, is just an anecdote. And I think, Mike, you know this, but might be amusing for our listeners. So we got married in a Catholic church, and priests can do legal wedding. Like they are generally also approved as like an agent of the state or whatever to
Okay, but not
legal side
without the marriage, the signing of the marriage certificate and sending that to the county is what makes that the legal part, though. Yes, the priest can witness it for sure. Yeah. But anyone can, anyone that can witness a notary or can witness a signature can witness a marriage certificate.
Right. Well, but you have to, they actually have to be like approved by the state to do it. It's not just like any random person can show up and do this or whatever. You can, at least in Ohio, because here's what happened.
Okay, fair enough.
So we were getting married in a Catholic church in Ohio, and we have a good friend who's a priest from Indiana who we asked if he could do the wedding, and we had arranged with the church in Cleveland where we were getting married for him to come in and do the wedding and stuff. And so we did all that, went through the whole ceremony. It turned out that the paperwork for him to be approved to do legal weddings in Ohio did not go through, or was not properly done or something. So immediately after our wedding, like before we even went out and, out of the church and everybody throws rice at you, or we can throw rice, do blue bubbles, whatever it is you do. It's all a blur. Quick, as everyone was filing out, we had to go back into the little like office behind, and the actual like pastor of that church did like a quick, like 1 minute, do you, okay, sign here to actually have the legal wedding. Yeah. So the whole big ceremony was all for show, literally not binding, not just because we didn't sign the certificate, like literally he was not allowed to do the legal wedding. So we had to go have a quick extra wedding after. Again,
as a lawyer, that sounds super problematic to have a religious system or some sort, to have the government interfering with, because like you can just go to the courthouse and have a judge do it, and like it seems problematic to have religious folks do that.
So to be precise about it, there's technically, in a normal wedding in church, there's actually two things, like you're getting married within the church and you're also doing the legal wedding at the same time that you could just do in front of a judge. So for that brief period between the two, we were by church law officially married. Like that was legit because he was a priest, but not by state law because he was not a registered agent of the state of Ohio or whatever. Anyhow, so and of course, so the whole thing, we find out about this that morning, like at the church, and the pastor comes out and he's like, so we just found out there's this issue with the paperwork. Here's what happened. And here's what we'll do is just after we'll like run back and I'll sign it, we'll sign a thing quick and you guys will be done. And I was like, okay, just don't tell Jessica because she's freaking out about this. It's like, well, I'll tell her after the wedding.
Yeah.
And so then after the wedding, we like walk down the aisle. I'm like, okay, we got to go back around to the front to sign some paperwork.
Should we get back to this episode?
Yeah, I guess we should. This is an interesting episode.
It was.
Did Gregory so the actor is Keenan Wynn, and I really thought I recognized him. He looks a little bit like Chris Maloney from Law and Order SVU, but that wasn't who I was thinking of, and I can't think of who I was, but his performance reminded me of someone, and I don't know if you have any ideas, like, or who it reminded you of, because I went and looked at his IMDb page, and I didn't see anything that I thought. He's in Dr. Strangelove, but he's not like a major character. I don't think that's what I would have remembered him from. He had an uncredited role in Touch of Evil, which I'm sure I don't remember him from, but I just thought that was cool that he was in Touch of Evil.
You didn't watch St. Elsewhere, did you?
No.
Oh, he's only in one episode of that anyhow. Love Boat, he's in one episode.
He had a really long career as a guest star on TV shows. Like, apparently, like, it felt like every TV show you've ever heard of in, the 1955 through 1980, he did a one episode guest arc in. So he clearly had a good successful career doing that, but he didn't have like anything that I noticed as like a breakout or like a recurring role. And I just can't think of what I would know him from. Anyway,
the only
Chris
thing
Maloney
I can maybe think of,
like,
he looked familiar to me too. And the only thing I can think of that I watched with my parents somewhat regularly was Dallas. He was Digger Barnes on 10 episods of Dallas, so I'd recommend.
Okay, and I never watched Dallas. That wouldn't have been it for me, but maybe maybe I've seen him in like commercials or reruns of. Yeah, I don't watch reruns of Dallas, but like when you see like the promos for it or something, I don't know. I liked him. He was it's kind of fun. I thought this whole episode was overacted, but it kind of fit because it was a super cheesy. It was basically a sitcom episode. Like the music was sitcom-y, the shooting was sick. It was basically all set in this one house, which was interesting. After we had a couple of expansive episodes, we had After Hours that we talked about, really liking the production design and the sort of elaborate department store set in there. And then the Mighty Casey, whatever we thought of it, like had stuff at the ballpark stadium and then out on the field and in the dugout. Like we saw two pretty expansive episodes, and this was very contained. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It reminded me of some of the best episodes of Friends, I thought, were the ones where they didn't go anywhere. It's just like the six of them in the apartment, like interacting. That's kind of what you go to a sitcom for. But this felt very sitcom-y. So the overacting kind of worked with that, but it was definitely hammy.
Yeah, I have all the same notes basically. That it was the music right off the bat. I was thinking the same thing. I'm like, is this going to be another non-Twilight Zone-y episode? And the acting, I am giving a little less credit to Keenan, whatever his name was, Keenan
Wynn.
To Keenan Wynn, yeah, thank you,
Keenan Wynn.
To Keenan Wynn, because even at the level of knowing he was overacting and knowing the wife was overacting, I thought it was still a little bit over the top. Like when she's looking for Mary, the mistress, like she's like aggressively looking around the room, and it was pretty hokey. And did you think before we knew, so George can summon these people by talking into his dictaphone or whatever, and then he can get rid of them by cutting off the ribbon and throwing it in the fire. And
right,
before
the piece of tape that he recorded that on.
Exactly. And before we know that that's the reality, when his wife comes in and he's we don't know if he's hidden Mary at that point or whatever, he pulls out these scissors, and I'm like, is he going to murder her with these scissors?
The same thing.
Yeah. I was like super disturbed by that initially. And then it actually made it kind of a neat payoff.
Yeah. And if I can just jump off that for 1 second, when she's about to come in, she's like knocking on the door. She's like, Gregory, I just need to come in for a minute. And Mary is in there like, oh no, not this again. Like there's this really interesting kind of setup that like, I wasn't sure if maybe the wife was like a crazy person and they don't live together, but she showed up and like repeatedly does this and he like can't shake her. So I wasn't sure what was going on with it. And the scissors also felt very like, okay, maybe she is a nut job and he's like prepared to protect himself if he needs to. But I was thinking of the After Hours a couple of weeks ago, which we liked a lot. But one of my criticisms of it was I thought it was really good and creepy and set this great vibe, but they set up a lot of things that not just didn't pay off, but that didn't make sense in hindsight. Like, wait, once I know what the twist is, all that stuff that happened before doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And this one I thought all this weirdness where I didn't know what was going on. Once you understood actually what was happening, it all did make sense. Like, this was a very tight episode in the sense of all the I's were dotted, all the T's were crossed. Like, they knew where they were going the whole way through, and everything connected with that, even if we didn't understand it at the time.
I agree, and I'll just put a little stamp on that by saying that I had written down a lot of questions early in watching this episode that then I deleted because it answered the questions. I was like, why can the wife see, because I thought it was maybe this invented character. I was like, why can the wife see Mary? And then, of course, they explain that, and that he actually is summoning her. There were a lot of things I totally agree that I thought were questions or loopholes, or not loopholes, but mistakes, plot holes, and that they corrected throughout the episode.
Well, just maybe to wrap that up before we take a break, I'll say one of them for me was there's this interesting connection with Purple Testament where you remember the main character in that who can see when, gets this premonition when people are going to die or sees this light in their face.
Yeah.
And he seemed really oddly obsessed with not how do I use this power to protect people or how did I get this power, but with whether people believed him. He was really concerned that nobody believed he really could do this to a degree that seemed and still seems kind of odd. I had a similar question with this because there's a point in the episode where he's really worried about Victoria believing that he can do these things. And I'm like, why do you care?
Yeah. Like,
it seems like their marriage isn't necessarily in great shape because he even said he created Mary so he had someone to talk to because he couldn't talk to her, couldn't talk to Victoria. And he was really, he basically imprisons her. He like locks the door and keeps her in the office like, no, you're going to stay here till you see this because it's really important that you believe me. And that felt kind of weird, but I also thought was paid off by the sort of final, well, I guess second to final twist because there's a very weird twist at the very end.
Yes.
But then I was like, okay, now I kind of get why it matters. So I liked, again, I just thought there was really nice, everyone's motivations the whole way through at least seemed consistent with where things ended up.
I definitely do want to talk about that twist, and we will talk about this twist and more about this episode when we come back after the break.
Hey everybody, if you haven't noticed, we are approaching the end of season 1 of The Twilight Zone, which is also going to be the end of season 1 of Deja Reviewed. But we need your help. After the last episode, we're going to do one wrap-up episode for this season, which will be the season finale of Deja Reviewed, and we're going to be talking about everything we talked about this whole season, about The Twilight Zone, what was good, what was bad, how it holds up, how it doesn't, and we want to hear from you. So send us in, what are the episodes that we got wrong? Is there some episode that you love that we underrated? Is there an episode you hated that we overrated? What are your top 3 episodes? What are your bottom 3 episodes? Send those to us and we will include them on air. Please do that soon because we will be recording a little bit ahead of time. So don't wait till after you hear the last episode to send us in something. If you have something to say, send it now.
And you can find where to send all that stuff on our social media. Just go to DejaReview.com. You can find links to all of our social media. You can even leave us a voicemail or shoot us a text if you just go to DejaReview.com and find all that information. We're hoping to hear from you before the finale.
Okay, welcome back. We are still talking about the final episode, episode 36 of season 1 of The Twilight Zone, which is called A World of His Own. And Mike, so I don't know why that's funny.
I thought you were going to flub what the title was.
I thought
which
it
is
was
Where
too.
is
It took me a
everybody?
second.
No, Mark, that was the beginning.
Not again.
We're in the
not
Twilight
again.
Zone. We just have to keep redoing this season over and over again. That's our Twilight Zone.
It's like Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
There's I saw an ad for, I don't know if it was on, I think it was on Hulu, for some sort of time travel thing that looked it had Andy Samberg in it, and I can't think of the title. We haven't
I
watched
saw
it.
that
We thought it
too.
looked interesting. Yeah, and it looked like Groundhog Day-esque, but it's like him and I think J.K. Simmons and
Yeah.
somebody else. Who is the female lead? I can't remember. But they're like all reliving the same day over again. See, I don't know. It looked interesting. You know, I love time travel stuff.
Yeah, me too.
Back to this episode, since I get myself sidetracked, I wanted to hit one more thing on the kind of first half of the episode. And you talked about Victoria very aggressively looking around for where this woman had disappeared to. There was a kind of funny bit where when she first looks around and doesn't see her, and it's right before this commercial break, and it's kind of like, dun, 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 where'd she go? And I was like, there's literally one of those fold out like changing screens right there. She could easily just be behind it.
Right. Yeah,
and they still cut to commercial. And I was like, that seemed not very surprising. Like, there's plenty of places she could be hiding. We come back and Victoria does look behind there, but then she's like looking all over. And this episode, I ended up liking this. I thought it gets interesting in the second half of it, but man, it takes a long time to get there.
Yeah.
There is a long period of her looking around and him kind of like, what are you doing? I'm checking if the room needs to be cleaned. I'm checking the walls. It just goes very, very slow nowhere for quite a long time before it finally gets interesting.
Yeah. That movie you were thinking of is called Palm Springs, and it's Andy Samberg, Kristen Milioti, and J.K. Simmons, like you said. That's on Hulu. I've not watched it.
Okay, so
I cannot
somebody check it out and tell me if it's any good.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
Watch that instead of whatever these weird dating shows are, Mike. Then you can report back.
There were a couple parts in the first half of the episode that I thought were kind of funny and I thought were kind of neat sort of meta commentary on writing and being a producer and being a creator that we're sort of seeing behind the curtain, which there was obviously a lot of that in the second half. But I loved when the wife tricks him into admitting that Mary was in the room by describing her and being like, oh, she sounds like the super plain drab girl. And the husband goes, she's not so drab. It reminds me of the classic police officers interviewing a suspect, and the suspect's like, well, no, I didn't murder him. And they're like, nobody said anything about a murder, which is that classic, like movie trope. And I did like the fact that the wife kind of commenting on, oh man, she's so drab. She's wearing such plain clothes. There's no way she could fall for her. And what a boring name Mary is, was this sort of meta commentary about him being a shitty playwright too, which I thought was kind of funny. Like that he was, because I have a very hard time naming characters when I'm creating something. And he's obviously like trying to describe, it almost made me think of Stephen King, who I love. His books are my comfort food for novels. But man, anytime there's anything approaching a sex scene, I'm like, I want to like tap out of any Stephen King, because it's like, I don't want this, like, he's so nerdy and like lovably nerdy, but like, that'd be like Weird Al Yankovic describing sex to me. I just don't want Stephen King like writing sex scenes. So in this, it was funny that like, he thought that Mary, he's describing this perfect hot woman, and the wife's like, you're describing this like very plain, boring woman that you're attracted to. I thought was kind of a neat meta commentary from Serling. And then I also
fits into the end, like he intentionally, like, yes, I screwed up with Victoria, who, spoiler alert, also is a creation of Gregory in one of the twists at the end. But that he realized, like, I didn't give her enough frailty, enough imperfection. And I kind of, some of the dialogue that felt kind of fake to me when it happened, but then made sense later on, was when he was talking about, like, she's so perfect and he can't talk with her because he's like beneath her. And I thought it was like him just trying to like flatter or butter her up. And then it turns out like, no, he literally like he created this image of perfection and then doesn't feel like he can actually interact with it.
Right. Another thing that I thought was in my head was kind of triggering. I could totally see Serling being the type of person that in an interview would be like, you know, I just write these characters and these characters jump off the page. They just come to life. Not just Serling. A lot of writers say that the characters, and I just mentioned Stephen King. I know that he was obsessed with the Dark Tower series, which is one of my favorite series of books ever. And he wrote himself into the Dark Tower series, spoiler for book 6 or 5, whenever that comes in. But he almost became obsessed with these characters because I remember reading, maybe it was On Writing or some interview with him talking about the Dark Tower series and how obsessed he was with it, that he felt like every once in a while, Roland, the main character, would basically step off the pages and kind of slap him into getting back to writing the Dark Tower series because he felt this obligation to it. So I feel like Serling was also commenting a little bit about himself having these characters, that these characters really exist. And There's a really good improv documentary called Trust Us, This Is All Made Up. It's TJ Jagodowski and TJ and Dave. What the heck's Dave's last name? It just fell out of my mind. But they're legendary improvisers. You would recognize Dave from Veep. He's her ex-husband from Veep. You'd recognize his voice from a million voiceovers too. So this Trust Us, This Is All Made Up is this, one of the comments they make in this movie is that it's very self-centered to them to think that these characters don't exist before they play them for this moment of their lives and after they play them for this moment of their lives, which is kind of the director or improviser way of saying, hey, your character has a backstory. They didn't just come into existence in this moment. And in this episode, even though he was kind of creating them out of nowhere and returning them, Mary at least had knowledge that he had kept destroying her. He keeps bringing her back to life. And then when his wife comes home, he just destroys her in the fire, which was, again, super disturbing and reminded me very much of The Prestige, which is a fantastic movie when he's doing the magic trick. And he's cloning himself, essentially. And every time he does this magic trick, he kills the clone. And then, of course, it becomes like, who's the clone at this point? Like, what is the actual clone? And this, like you said, sort of the religious allegories of this creation and destruction of humanity, I guess. We've got that rearing its head in the Twilight Zone again.
Well, yeah, I've had that same experience, not as often, honestly, as I would have liked, not of The Prestige and cloning myself, but of writing. And, you hit a point where the characters, you have an outline like, okay, so this is supposed to happen next. And the character's like, no, we're not doing that. And they go and like start doing, and it feels like the story's like writing itself in a direction you had not thought of. And the characters are really creating it. And that's awesome. As a writer, sometimes it's problematic because they'll write themselves into a corner, but it's actually really exciting when these characters do sort of become real enough to take on a life of their own, and they're behaving the way that they want to behave, whether or not it's what you as the writer intended for them to do. It's, it's a really exciting sort of moment of creation. I think you just hit on what to me was the most interesting question of this episode. We talked a couple weeks ago about whether Twilight Zone was sci-fi or suspense thriller or what. And I mentioned, it was a good question you raised, and we kind of talked about both sides of it. I mentioned one of the things to me that makes it feel like sci-fi is when it does raise these interesting philosophical questions and kind of leave you thinking. And the question of Mary, and like, yeah, she's aware of her appearance and disappearance. She even says like, don't bring me back and do this again.
Yeah.
I'm like tired of it.
Is it painful when she...
Yeah. Well, It, like you feel really bad for her. Like she seems to be a character with her own agency. You talked about Stephen King having the protagonist of The Dark Tower, like, come and basically tell him what to do, like, hey man, stop writing this other stuff, go back and write more about Dark Tower. Even Victoria here, who's a creation of Gregory, he has this moment where he's like, you did something I didn't, I expressly told you not to, I said, go see this movie and you disobeyed and can't. Like, she has agency of her own, which is interesting, but that makes it even sort of more terrible what he does to Mary. If she really has her own agency, her own existence before and after these moments that he sort of calls her up out of the ether, and she feels the pain of being repeatedly like erased from existence and like pleads with him not to do it. I thought that was really interesting, and it reminded me, it's much more explicit about it, but of The Lonely with the sex bot, and where he talked about sort of, what I know we call it the sex bot, which is not officially what it was.
I mean, that
show,
definitely is what it was.
But that is what it was. But like, what rights, what agency does this sort of artificial human have? And these seem to be like real people with full personalities, backstories, agency, and everything. Yet he maintains this complete control over them.
Totally agree. And that was kind of the also problematic point of this episode, because there was a very much Matt Lauer vibe when he kept locking these two women into his office that I was getting a little bit uncomfortable with. But yes, the million things that we've mentioned before, Battlestar Galactica, all these things about what actually humanity is that we've seen time and time again, frankly, in this entire first season, just coming up again. I mean, even just as silly as it is, the Mighty Casey specifically addressed this last week, that like, is it having a heart? Is that what humanity is? So and we'll most likely talk about this next week, like the themes that we see recurring over and over again in the Twilight Zone. Some of them in the first season of the Twilight Zone, I should say. Some of them surprising, some of them maybe not. But there was more recurring themes, I think, than I expected in the Twilight Zone for an anthology series.
For instance, It's a Wonderful Life recurred like 4 episodes in a row where it just was the plot of that.
In the last 5 episodes, though, only.
We're really out of ideas. I want to just give a shout out to Victoria here, who I think was intentionally, like, again, overacted Hammy, like really, bug eyes, like what to a lot of things. But we often talk about in the Twilight Zone how sometimes people don't seem to ask the questions or be startled by the unusual. They just sort of accept things as they are. I really liked when he explains this sort of crazy thing to her and she's like, okay, I'm having you committed. You're a nutball. And then he's like, no, I'll prove it. He locks her in, which we just talked about. And he's like, I'll do it. And he like starts dictating about Mary and she's walking into the front door and down the hall and you hear her steps coming and stuff. And then, she comes in and sees Victoria. And so this is like his proof, like, look, I can talk these people into existence. And Victoria, to her credit, instead of being the classic sort of Twilight Zone person, like, well, okay, I guess that crazy thing you just said is totally true. She comes up with a pretty good explanation for it. She's like, no, this is some scheme. I don't know how you snuck her out of here. Maybe there's a secret door or something, but then you're trying to like trick me, make me think I'm nuts, try to get me committed. And so you just had her like walk around the house and come back in as you're talking and she can hear you. So I'll believe you. Then I'm like, that's a perfect, like, that's exactly the thing a normal, rational person would think just happened. I loved that she brought it up.
I totally agree, because I had the note that when she first sees Mary, she has this total non-reaction, and there almost should have been a sad trombone sound, because she like looks back at Gregory and almost like rolls her eyes. But then when she goes on to explain it, it's like, yeah, she's like, this is such an absurd excuse that this is just nonsense. Yeah, I totally agree. I had the exact same.
The term
note.
didn't exist, but she basically accuses him of gaslighting her.
Yeah, very much.
Which if this scene if you just like cut that scene in to anything else, you didn't know it was a Twilight Zone, you'd say, yes, that's what he's doing. Like, clearly he can't just talk people into existence. Had she known she was in the Twilight Zone, she might have had different opinion.
Did you ever watch the mid-'80s Amazing Stories series? I think it might have been on Fox or something like that. Or maybe it was like ABC, NBC. I don't know. It was Amazing Stories.
Is that Steven Spielberg produced? I think.
Yes. I'm almost positive. So there's an episode of Amazing Stories that has Kevin Costner and Kiefer Sutherland somehow in it. And it's about this. It's a very similar plot line where this guy, he's a cartoonist. He can draw things that pop into existence. And I don't remember, maybe it was like World War I, World War II. I do remember him being like a gunner in like the belly of a plane. So whenever that would have been. And for whatever reason, the landing gear doesn't come down. So he draws this very like cartoonish landing gear that they're able to land this plane. And it was kind of a neat effect for at least I was blown away as a kid, for the mid-'80s. But it very much reminded me of the scene with the elephant, which I thought was pretty neat. When Victoria goes to leave, when Victoria finally does sneak the key from him and goes to leave the office, he quickly dictates that there's a red-eyed elephant blocking her way. And I mean, kudos. I guess it was the last episode of the season. They had budget to burn, but they got an elephant in this house that is like screaming at her or whatever, that blocks Victoria's way out of the thing. And it just reminded me of that Amazing Stories, like, not he was creating a problem, but he was solving a problem of his own about her leaving. Although in hindsight, the way we see the episode turn out, although they didn't want to ruin the twist, and I do think this was I did not see this twist coming. And
I didn't either. This was one of the better twists.
Yeah, and considering I've seen this episode before, I just did not remember that twist happening. So it would have blown the twist, but he could have also just dictated that she turned around and came back. I guess. Although not that
But
you're getting
he
into
had
that
lost
free will
control of
question.
her, I think, is part
Yeah.
of the point of it. Like the character
Right.
had come alive enough that he couldn't. Yeah, I also wanted to give a bit of a shout out to the production here. And like I said, this entire thing is set inside their house. This is not as elaborate a production as some of the other ones we've seen, and so maybe that did leave him with some spare budget. But when he says like a red-eyed elephant's outside, and it cuts to her walking out, and it's close up of her face, and she's kind of like looks up and kind of, screams. And I was like, okay, she's gonna run back
You're
in
just
and
going to
just
hear
say
an
there's an
elephant
elephant
sound.
there,
Yeah.
or you hear an elephant sound, or maybe stock footage shot of of an elephant. And like, no, then they cut to a shot behind her, like
Yeah.
running back in, and there's an elephant in the hallway. I was like, all right, good work, Twilight Zone. Like, not cutting any corners there. It was nice.
Good. I thought a good twist that made for a pretty creepy ending. And I also like how the twist ended up explaining, because right off the bat, I was like, is this, and I know this is sort of a 60s thing and a trope in sitcoms of the unattractive man with the very attractive wife. But right off the bat, I was like, why is this attractive young brunette with this old dude? Why is she even married? Why is Mary interested in him? Why is Victoria interested in him? And then I liked how the end explained it, that it's like, well, because, yeah, he's this nerdy, like, playwright that just is invented his fantasy world.
Yeah, and actually, this is a super minor misstep, but I think I would have liked to see that push even a little further. Like, the opening voiceover says one of America's most noted playwrights. And so I was willing to go with like, okay, look at how weird or even ugly some of like big stars are, like famous rock stars or whatever. And they will get anyone they want because they're a rock star. And I was willing to buy he was this like super famous playwright. And so, okay, that's why she was with him. And it would have been more interesting if it was like, a mediocre playwright.
Yeah. Or struggling playwright. You say that those rock stars can get any woman that they want because they're rock stars, but are you sure that they have not made a visit to a demon and gotten a love potion that they slipped into some champagne?
Maybe. Or if they did, I don't want to see it because we have seen enough of that episode. I didn't predict the ending coming either. I actually thought what was going to happen. So Victoria does the classic villain thing, and she is not the villain in this episode, but where she tells him her plan. She's like, okay, I'll stay for now, but first chance I get, I'm going to leave and have you put away.
Yeah.
Like, don't tell him that.
Right. He's locked you in his room.
But so I thought what was going to do is he was going to dictate a copy of himself and like hide, and the copy of himself was going to come get like put away, and he would live on.
That would have been a cool ending.
That would have been, but what they actually did, I thought, was much more interesting. And this may have been the first episode, and maybe you'll have better recall than I am and think of another one, but
probably not.
I have a pretty bad memory. We'll see. But we've seen a lot of episodes where the beginning works pretty well and they're very interesting. And then I feel like we've talked often about how the payoff doesn't quite live up to it or wasn't quite satisfying. We've seen some episodes where the payoff was satisfying and all the build up to it was satisfying as well. In some of the best episodes. This was one where, man, the first half of it, like I mentioned, it was really slow. It was really overacted. I couldn't tell where it was going. And I was like, okay, they're going to end on a down note. And this might be the first episode where, man, the ending really knocked it out of the park and was much, much better than the earlier part of the episode.
I'm going to read you my note from my notes. This is an episode that's sort of redeemed for me by the closing scene instead of ruined. I could not agree more. The Purple Testament, I think, legit would have been, if not my favorite episode of the season, definitely one of my favorite episodes of the season, except for that coda at the end. I totally
agree. And as we've talked
agree.
about, that didn't ruin all the good stuff in that episode. But man, that coda scene definitely dropped the overall level.
It was
of the
horrible.
episode.
That might be the worst scene of season one. like honestly, and to drop it into such a great episode.
Let me point you towards
anything that happened in well, and frankly, that's another one. I mean, that was that would have been a boring episode, but I feel like it went to kind of, in our minds, legendarily bad because of that ridiculous ending of what was that one called? The slot machine.
The fever,
The fever.
where the slot machine like rolls out into the street and
Yeah.
spits a quarter at the dead body.
Yeah. Like little dumb stuff, even like the what you need, like the dumb ending of that one with the where they're interviewing the random people and he gives them a comb. Remember?
Yeah, you know, I think maybe a better like because we're hitting some really the worst ones. I think, but something I think we've seen more commonly in just a couple episodes ago is the After Hours, which we liked, and we thought the sort of twist that she was a mannequin was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like it didn't like ruin the episode, but it didn't quite pay off all the stuff they had set up. It wasn't a super satisfactory, like, oh wow, all the other stuff that was bizarre and weird, now it all comes together and makes sense. So and I feel like we've seen a lot of those, again, even in episodes we liked, where it's not necessarily the ending's terrible. We've seen some with terrible endings, but where we're like, it doesn't quite reach it. And man, this one did not see the ending coming.
Yeah.
It was super cool. It super paid off everything else and really was a twist. And I will say, even like he goes and opens this safe and he pulls out this envelope that says Victoria West, and that's what has the tape where he, created her, and it's going to end up getting thrown in the fire. But even when he opens up the safe and like goes to pull something out, I still didn't know that where it was going. I was like, is it going to be a prenup? Is it going to be he has
A gun?
blackmail info on her? Like, yeah, like they really like it wasn't until we look at it and it says Victoria West on it, and I'm like, oh my God, she's a creation too.
Well, then it was
amazing.
And then it was neat too that he wasn't going to do it. She is the one she was a victim of her own downfall because she didn't believe him. She threw it into the fire. And then going back to poor Mary, it did seem like before the film actually caught on fire that she was in pain, or she said she felt weird. Like, I don't know if you remember that part, but so there.
No, but and there's a difference in that Mary just sort of like vanishes right away, and Victoria like starts to feel something, and then like and has this moment of realization.
But bear in mind, hers was in the envelope, so it had a little time.
So it was like taking longer to burn.
Yeah. So speaking of this final twist, should we get to the closing narration?
Yes. Well, I will be curious to hear how you read this.
I don't know how I'm going to do it. Okay. So
would you like you to be Rod Serling and I will be Gregory West?
okay, yeah, that would be good. I just took note. I wasn't going to actually read Gregory West, but this is perfect. Yeah. So Rod Serling comes out. So this is the first time we've seen Rod Serling. And
second, because we saw him before Mirror Image.
Yes. Sorry. First in episode scene that we've seen.
Yes.
That we've seen Rod Serling as a character in The Twilight Zone.
Okay, so here's the ending voiceover. Mike is Rod Serling. I am Gregory West.
And I am stage directions blocking in the industry.
Do those in a different voice so you can tell them apart.
Deal. We hope you enjoyed tonight's romantic story on The Twilight Zone. At the same time, we want you to realize that it was, of course, purely fictional. In real life, such ridiculous nonsense could never...
Rod, you shouldn't. I mean, you shouldn't say such things as nonsense and ridiculous.
Gregory continues as he throws the tape into the fire. He has a Rod Serling tape. He has Rod Serling's tape. And Rod says, well, that's the way it goes. In a resigned tone as he fades away. And then the narrator, then Rod's actual closing narration is leaving Mr. Gregory West still shy, quiet, very happy, and apparently in complete control of the Twilight Zone.
Oh man, this might have been my very favorite end bit. And even the way he 100% says like, and apparently in complete control of the Twilight Zone.
This was super fourth wall, super good. It's interesting to see Rod as a character. Like I said, not that the episode necessarily needed to be redeemed, because the twist with Victoria I thought was great, and paid off a little bit maybe of a boring start to it. But this knocked it out of the park, I thought, as an ending, not only of the season, of the episode, but of the season.
I 100% agree with you. And like you said, even if it didn't have that end bit with Rod Serling, it still would have been super satisfactory. Victoria throws her envelope in the fire. She disappears. He calls Mary back, and this time he says she's now his wife. He says, Mrs. Mary West. He's like, well, ha. Now I've got it all figured out. She appears, could have just gone to the ending voiceover, leaving Mr. Gregory West still shy, quiet, and happy, and apparently in complete control. Like, that would have been cool. But man, adding the bit with Rod Serling and then Gregory West interacting with him and pulling out the Rod Serling envelope also from the hidden vault. Oh, that was just amazing.
I would argue that this would have been a perfect series ending because he erases Rod Serling from existence and we never get another Twilight Zone episode.
Do you know
if they were
did
renewed
they
or not?
at this point know that they were coming back for season 2?
I don't know. I have no idea if that wasn't clear.
But I'm with you. It would have been a good ending for the series as well. But very, very, and like even by Twilight Zone twist standards, that was unexpected. I like totally blindsided.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It was very cool.
Should we rate this thing?
Yeah, let's do it. Sweat.
I don't remember
Me neither.
seeing anyone
I said
sweaty.
one. Okay. And then let's rate the episode.
Victoria should have started sweating when her envelope was in the fire. Like,
yeah,
like she's rating. Why don't you go first this time?
Okay. If I was just rating the first half of this episode, it would have been very low. I think, and looking at some other comparable episodes, I want to come in at around, and I don't know if I've ever done a half. I want to come in around a 3.5. But I kind of want to know what you're coming in at so I can go up or down to get it to where I think it should be. I think my final, if you were like a 3, then I would go up to a 4 to get it to a 3.5 because I think it should be there.
And this might be I would be okay with a 3.5. I actually probably was going to come in at a 4. And I think that might be an emotional reaction. The first half of this really was pretty weak and cheesy, but I feel like in hindsight, from having seen the end of the episode, the first half was better in retrospect because we understood why it was what it was.
Okay, let's talk about it. Because I think in context, I can definitely be talked up to a 4. So here are some 3.5.
And I've almost never been the one talking you up. So I will say I don't think this is skewing. Like, I thought about the rating and I really think this was a strong end to the series, to the season. Yeah. And particularly a strong end to this episode. You know, I will say again, we've had more than our fair share of clunkers in the last, let's say 10 episodes. So, you know, I was thinking like maybe I'm skewed a little up because of that, but like, no, actually this was one of, if not the best Twilight Zone twists we've seen at the end, and it totally worked with everything that came before it. And then the surprise secondary twist with Rod Serling. Look, this is not a 5-star episode because the beginning, even in hindsight, is not great.
And the acting is bad.
So but I felt like this was really solid. This is an episode I have no qualms recommending to somebody. Yes. And, you know, I think they could really, I was watching this and my son was kind of looking over my shoulder. I was watching on my computer screen and he's 8 and he was watching and he was enjoying it. Yeah. And, you know, like, oh man, he can just get rid of people by throwing those tapes in there. Yeah. So yeah, I felt I would go 4.
Okay. Well, and again, our early episodes, I think we underrated, but here are some 3.5s. Mr. Denton, Walking Distance, The Lonely, Nightmare as a Child, A Stop at Willoughby, The After Hours. 4s, 16mm Shrine, Time Enough at Last, Purple Testament, which literally should be a 4.5 or a 5 in my book, but it screwed itself with that final episode, or final scene. The Monsters Are Doing on Maple Street, and I think that's it for 4s. And I would say that this is right up there with A Time Enough at Last or a 16mm Shrine. It kind of reminds me a little bit of 16mm Shrine, where the reality bleeding into these things. Monsters Are Due on Maple Street.
I think when you actually list all those out, you know, and we're not going to rate it between the, we'll settle on a 3.5 or a 4. It comes in almost as like a 3 3/4 to me. Like I feel like it's better than those 3.5s, but it's definitely not as good as some of those 4s.
Agreed.
So
And that's kind of why I
want to
went
push it.
And when I was looking at the 3s, because there's definitely some 4s that I like better than this. And there's some 3.5s that I like less than this. So you're right. It probably should be a 3.75. We're not doing that in the last episode.
Let's not do. Well, okay. So here's what I'm going to say. It's our last episode of the season, and we have had a lot of bad episodes in this last chunk. So let's give it a 4 and end on a higher note.
Okay, fair enough. Okay. Speaking of that last episode, Mark, you don't have any chance to guess along what next episode is about because there are no more episodes in season 1 of The Twilight Zone. We did it.
But there is one more episode for this season of Deja Review.
Yes, there is.
So next week we will be doing our wrap up of The Twilight Zone. We are not continuing on to all the episodes of season 2, 3, 4, 5 of The Twilight Zone. We feel like we've got enough information to kind of make our call on this show. But next week, we will be kind of looking back over the whole first season of The Twilight Zone and of this show, kind of rehashing a little bit and talking about like how we feel like The Twilight Zone holds up, is relevant, should or should not have been rebooted, all of that kind of stuff in our closing episode for the season.
We're also going to do, Mark's taking care of the business stuff. We're also going to do some fun stuff. Our favorite episodes, our least favorite episodes. I think we should do our biggest like rating mistakes that we think, specifically The Lonely, the sweatiest episodes, maybe our top 3, bottom 3, all that kind of stuff. It's probably going to be recorded by the time you're hearing this, but if you want to tweet any of those things at us, we would love to hear them and respond. Thank you all for listening. Feel free, like I said, listen to us, tweet at us, leave us a rating wherever you're listening, comment at us. If you are enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and please tell people about the podcast because that would be awesome. You can find us at dejareview.com where you can find all of our social media. You can leave us a voicemail, text message, and we hope that you tune in for our Twilight Zone wrap up next week.
Deja Review.